Hey guys, Tom Barclay here at Tottenham's training ground after doing Ange Postecoglou's pre-match press conference ahead of Everton at the weekend on the crunch game for Ange Postecoglou and Spurs in what's been a very, very difficult season in the league in particular. Spurs currently in 14th, amazingly after 11 defeats, and going to an Everton side who can't seem to score but do have a new manager and one we know very, very well in David Moyes, which is actually the opponent for Ange Postecoglou's first ever game as Tottenham manager. I remember it well, it was in Perth. Tottenham played West Ham. I remember David Moyes afterwards being on this sort of little buggy in the Perth stadium going off to a press conference. West Ham actually won that game, if you remember, was the first game for Ange back then, and it feels like a lifetime ago. So much has happened since, but yeah, he's going to be taking on Moyes again in what will be a crunch game on Sunday. So from the open section of the press conference, it was mainly sort of team news and sort of comments on transfers that were probably the most interesting thing. So I'll start off with the injury stuff. So Timo Werner, who picked up that hamstring injury, which he had a scan on against Tamworth, he is now going to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. So that is a blow for his amount of squad players. Obviously, Spurs fans generally not the biggest supporters of Timo Werner, but you know when he's playing well, even if he struggles in front of goal with his finishing, the way he can stretch teams, there's a reason Postecoglou has played him quite regularly, even after giving him what he called feedback, but it seemed like pretty strong criticism after the Rangers game. So in terms of dwindling numbers, they get one back in Richarlison and then they lose one in Timo Werner. That sort of just sums up how it's going for Ange Postecoglou's squad depth this season. So Werner out for 3 to 4 weeks. And there's a couple of sort of doubts, I would say. So he said Brennan Johnson's got a bit of a calf complaint after the North London derby, so we'll have to see whether he is fit. In the same way that Yves Bissouma had soreness, apparently, after Arsenal when he came off at half-time, having given the ball away for Trossard's what had to be winning goal. So we'll have to wait on the two of them. Bentancur obviously is still out due to concussion protocol after he got knocked out against Liverpool in the League Cup, in the Carabao Cup semi-final. Ben Davies should be involved. He is back now, which is a welcome boost, welcome return at the back from the Ange's sort of decimated centre-back positions. And Ben Foster, that's a combination of Fraser Forster and Ben Foster. Fraser Forster is back in training, but I don't know if he'd even be on the bench, to be honest. Obviously Kinski's there. Brandon Austin has been on the bench recently, so we'll wait to see if Forster comes back into it or not. Whether he ever plays a game again for Spurs, I don't know, so we could question mark over that. So those are the sort of team news aspects. Regarding transfers, he could stay with the similar line to what he said throughout, that the club's working hard, January's not easy. He's asked whether he was frustrated that they haven't managed to get someone in yet, because it's funny, in a way, injuries seem to be easing up or close to easing up. So signing players right now feels less important than it probably did a couple of weeks ago. They really, really could have done with some help at centre back in particular at the start of the window, and now they've got players coming back. But it has cost them in the interim period. Obviously, they need a bigger squad. They need any new players that are up to the standard and fit the squad would be very welcome, obviously. But yeah, I can see why fans are getting frustrated that no business has been done apart from Kinski coming in so far. But Ange says he's not frustrated. He just understands how it's going. He also made the comment that clubs are aware that Tottenham are trying to buy players, and that is obviously ramping up the transfer fees, I suppose. He didn't actually explicitly say that, but he said they were aware, and it has an effect effectively when it comes to doing business. So one to watch. He was asked whether he was confident they still get players in. He said there's confidence you can be. And he was asked specifically if an attacker or a defender remain the priorities, as generally was widely understood that they wanted to strengthen those areas. And he said, we'll see who's available and what we can get. So not really definitive on either. But the one player that was put to him was obviously Randall Kolo Muani, who looks set to sign for Juventus on loan. It seems Tottenham have missed out on his loan capture, and he was asked about him specifically, and it's quite rare that any kind of manager will talk about individuals, particularly if they're not their players. Ange generally is a bit more open and talks a bit more about certain things than other managers. I think I saw in the last video about Graham Potter, the way he would shut everything down from a transfer point of view. At least on Muani, he said that He did admit they were being interested in a number of players. He didn't shut down that they were interested in Muani, but he did say, did we get to the point where we thought he was coming to us? No. So essentially, I would say, admitting that they were interested, but they never actually thought, or never got to the point where they thought he was going to managed to get him over the line. A blow, really, because looking at his profile, what he's done, the fact that he was available from PSG, he really could have helped this squad, I think, with the way Postecoglou likes to play. So a blow from Ange's point of view, even if he's not going to admit that publicly. And let's hope they've got someone else lined up, really, or they're working on getting somebody in. Particularly, I mean, consider Werner, no matter what you think of him, he's out for next month. So they need extra bodies. They need extra bodies back. Moving on from that, he was asked about David Moyes. Obviously, as I mentioned, taking on one of the most experienced managers in recent Premier League history, I suppose. Did wonderful things with West Ham, even if the fans wanted him gone towards the end. He obviously won a Europa Conference League. Had a great time at Everton the first time round, led to that move to Man United, which didn't work out, but he was a really terrific spell there. And talked about how he's still on top of his game. He feels Moyes went out at West Ham and was still, being just as effective as he's ever been. And he also talked about how when he was a Celtic manager, Ange that is, that Moyes reached out to him at one point, so he called him a top guy. And he also made the comment that he's no longer, Ange this is, the oldest manager in the Premier League, thanks to David Moyes' return, so he was quite happy about that. But obviously, it's not really a time right now for laughing and joking as much as Ange can sort of, particularly in his pre-match press conferences, it can be quite sort of jovial at times. Right now, it feels like the hard-hitting questions need to be asked. I'd say a few of those were asked, particularly in the embargo section, which I might do a video later. But he was asked in the open section whether the players are hurting. Because he said that the question was that you said the other day how much you're hurting from these results, after the North London derby in particular. Are the players hurting as well? He agreed. He said the players are hurting. He's sure they are. It's not acceptable. He reiterated it's not acceptable to have this many defeats. But he still has great belief that they can have a big impact this season. Still thinks big things can happen this season for Tottenham, and whilst some fans might be losing faith on that, you just look at the cup competitions and it still could happen. They could still win at Liverpool. They've got a great first step. They've got a long way to go on that one, but they have more players back. Liverpool got to focus on other things at that point as well. It won't just be the Carabao Cup for them. They're having a slight wobble of late. If wobble's a bit strong, they still look very, very good, and it will be totally up against Tottenham, but they could do it, and with Ange's style of play it could happen. And to get into the final against probably Newcastle, who you'd think would get past Arsenal, right? Newcastle look formidable right now, but this is a long way away, the final, so there's definitely a chance, and that's what he still believes. A couple of other topics he was asked about. He was asked about Pedro Porro. Pedro Porro apparently is the most used player by Spurs this season, most minutes out of any player, and whether he felt like he had basically no choice to keep playing due to the injuries. And he basically said, yeah, that's kind of the situation at the moment, just to a lack of players. I mean, it's funny, he was also asked about if Ben Davies is back now, does this give a chance for Archie Gray to go into midfield? He didn't specifically say no, but he did say they don't really have that kind of luxury at the moment, so because of the lack of depth at the back. So I would still probably expect going into this game that Archie Gray continues at centre-back. And that leads me on, I suppose, to the likely lineup. I don't know. I was thinking about it. I was thinking maybe if Davies could start, if he was ready to start, you could even give Porro a rest and Gray could go right back or left back and Spence could move it to the right. Or you could even maybe play him in midfield. But based on that answer specifically about midfield, I wouldn't expect that from Gray. So let's go through the likely lineup. Kinski again in goal. I still think it's going to be the same back four. I don't think yet Davies is going to step right into it. Bear in mind, he had a setback himself with his hamstring injury, and they seem to be so concerned and worried, I suppose, about players re-injuring themselves. It happens so often that they're not going to try and take risks. So I'd be surprised if it wasn't Porro again at right back, Draggers in, Gray, Spence. Then midfield, I think Bergvall's done enough to sort of start in that holding midfield position. Sort of depends, I guess, on Basuma, whether he's fit or not. Surely Maddison starts a game again, because if he's not starting these games with all these situations in midfield with doubts, then I don't know when he will. Pape Sarr wasn't great against Arsenal, came off at half time, so whether it's Maddison, Bergvall and Sarr or Bissouma being fit, I think it would be 3 of the 4 of them, and then up top I think it would probably still be Kulusevski, Solanke's son, based on the fact that Johnson, who didn't really have much of an impact to be honest when he came off the bench against Arsenal, has this calf complaint. I'd expect him probably start on the bench, but we'll see. Bit of time still to the game. So finally, another massive game for Spurs. It's just really important that they start getting wins. I mean, they are now 8 points from the relegation zone. I don't think they're going to get relegated, but they are having relegation form at the moment. They really need a win. Everton have got a new manager. You expect some sort of bounce soon and some more effort from their players, but they really struggle to score goals. So how a clean sheet could really go down well for Tottenham. One thing they need to really start cutting out is when they're taking leads in games, they are throwing games away way too often. 18 points dropped from winning positions they've had this season, which is the second worst in the league. Only Fulham have had more, so they really need to sort of work on that. I remember Everton last season when Richarlison probably had his best game for Spurs when he scored twice, 2 beautiful goals. He's obviously back in the mix now against his old side. If he can step up, I don't think he'd be quite ready to start, hence why I wouldn't pick him in my likely lineup, but Ange did say he'd definitely be involved. If he can have some sort of impact in a similar way, that could really help, because the forward line really needs a bit of extra impetus right now. And Richarlison, no matter what you think of him, regarding his injury history, he does under Ange, I feel like he has generally contributed well when he has played. So if we can see a bit more of that, maybe Spurs can go and expose a bit of fragility at the back from Everton's point of view and their toothlessness up front. But we know right now Spurs look about as fragile as any team in the Premier League, so who knows which way it's going to go. But my word, Postecoglou could do with a good result at Everton going into the Europa League next week, and just calm any sort of mild talk, I suppose, over the sort of unthinkable prospect of Spurs being sucked into a relegation battle. Anyway, I will probably do a video after the game, so I'll speak to you then. Cheers, guys.